Now, once you've got your pastel supplies, you need to know how to use them. Otherwise, the supplies are just going to sit there and you're going to be too afraid to even make a start. By the end of this lesson, you're going to know how to hold your pencil, your pans, your pastel sticks, how to apply them to the paper, and more importantly, rather than show you things like circles being coloured in, I'm going to show you a real drawing, a real world example, so you can see how I apply the techniques to a drawing. That's going to fill you with confidence and going to make you really want to start drawing straight away. Stick with it to the end. This is going to be possibly a game changer for you if you've been on the fence waiting to start drawing. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, so using pastel pencils to start with, pastel matte paper. Okay, so pastel matte or Canson velvet, they're my two favorite and really only pastel papers that I use. Now they've got a slight texture to the surface. The Canson velvet, perhaps a little bit more texture. This is the pastel matte. Let me show you how I apply the pencils to the paper. Now, most people, if they're completely new to pencil art as such, they would hold the pencil just like they would hold a pen. So when we're writing, most often we're using a pen like that. Okay, and we all hold it in a different way. But if I flip to the side, you can see the angle is really, more like 45 degrees or so to the paper, maybe even a little bit more. We don't want that type of angle with the pastels. If we do that with pastels, okay, and we're going in at 45 degrees or 60, 90 degrees, and it's basically pointing down like that on the paper. How can I show it? At that angle. We're going to get a flat tip extremely quickly. We don't want that, okay? So when we're doing, let's say, an underlayer, first of all, we've got the paper at a real shallow angle. Let me get another piece of pastel paper so you can see, real shallow angle like that. Okay, so that's how I'm applying pastel to paper, and very light pressure. Now, after a few strokes, I turn the pastel pencil. Now, I see lots of people that don't do that. What happens if you don't do it is you'll get a flat edge, okay? So if you keep turning it after every couple of strokes, you are really sharpening the pencil. Okay, so that's how you apply it. That's the angle with pencils. Now what you will notice, let me just apply a small amount of pastel. You see that texture on the paper? Now on the underlayer, I want to get rid of that, okay? There's a couple of ways of doing it. What lots of people will do online, including some tutors, you'll see they'll keep pushing and pushing with the pencil, building up pastel, building it up, keep building it up until it goes, okay? And then it's smooth. Okay, that's fair enough, but what you've now got is a lot of pastel on the surface. The more pastel you've got on the surface, the more difficult it is to put more layers of detail and refinement on top. Now, if you're on my channel, you probably want to be drawing animals. Usually these animals have fur. Fur is comprised of multiple layers, most often. Not all the time, but very often. To recreate that look, we want to be able to get more and more layers of refinement and detail on top. When I say refinement, what do I mean? More accurate colors, more accurate tones, and then texture, okay? So I don't like adding more pastel in that very first layer. What I like to do is just put a little bit of pastel down, like this. I can see that texture of the paper, and I use a paper stump, okay? Any of these cheap paper stumps. For underlayers, I like it to be soft, okay? And then I just use light pressure, and you see the texture of the paper goes. Yes, a little bit of the pastel goes as well, but you can see it's now much smoother. And then I can apply just a little bit more pastel on top, just a little bit, very little. And you can see we don't have much of that paper showing, texture showing anymore. And then when I don't want to be removing any pastels, you can see this removes a little bit, just use my finger, blend gently. And what you will find by doing it like this, you can see just a tiny amount of pastel on my finger. You can then put multiple layers on top of refinement and finally detail where you won't doing it that way. So first thing to think about, keep your pastel pencil down, shallow angle. You don't want the wood rubbing the paper, but you do want a shallow angle. Be careful when your pencil gets really low like this, and it needs sharpening, okay, because you don't want to be scratching the surface with the wood on there. Now let me show you blending together, another just a basic lesson, because what I find is that all these basic lessons, they're okay, but in the real world we don't do things like this that often. You see people colouring in blocks and colouring in circles and blending in circles. That's all well and good, but when you actually want to draw something like this, then yes, these techniques apply, but it's easier to see it actually on a gorilla drawing rather than drawing a circle or a square. So let's say I wanted to blend these two colours together. So I've got this purple going into blue. I can just bring it in slowly, and you see it kind of glazes together. Now, I would personally either use a stump again. So I go from the light, you can see circular strokes. This is if we don't want any texture and we don't want to apply too much pastel. Okay, and just go like that, almost tickling them together. And then you can use a clean finger. It's generally starting in the light colour, going down into the dark colour and blend in. And then of course you can go back in and add more colour. And then perhaps blend in the other way. So you can make a very fine, seamless blend and obviously go back again. So you can keep playing with this, going back and forth till you get it very, very smooth. So that's how you could do that. Now you've got one thing to keep in mind, I think I'll tell you now. If you're doing things like animals and you want to build up lots of layers of fur, underlayer very light, okay? Use as little as possible. Blend in with the paper stump. Or if you're using PanPastels, I'll show you in a minute, blend that in, and then you're building texture on top. If you're doing a background and you want it to blur out and be soft and smooth, that's when you can really start using much more pressure. And the reason you can do that with backgrounds is because we're not going to be putting details on top if we're doing a blurry background. And the more pastel you get down, within reason, don't go too crazy, the easier it'll be to blend and the easier it will be for it to look soft. Now, without making this very basic intro really to holding pastel pencils and pastels and applying them complicated, it's easier to do this backgrounds that are blurry and soft with pastel sticks. People are afraid of pastel sticks for some reason, but they are by far the easiest to blend out. Okay, so why not show you? Now, keep in mind a pastel pencil, okay, the amount of pastel that's in there compared to a pastel stick. We've got tons more actual pastel in the stick, as you can see, compared to the nib in a pastel pencil. So using sticks is really going to make your pencils last a lot longer if you're doing backgrounds. If you're doing, say, a blue background and it's this size, you may go through a pencil or two just filling that in. Whereas with a stick, perhaps you'll use a quarter of a stick. When you're using sticks, once again, we're not going in at 90 degrees. We're going in at an angle, roughly the same angle. And I'm almost always using circular strokes. Now, some of the sticks are super, super soft. There's brands like Schminky, Senelia. They are so soft As soon as you touch the paper, it's like putting butter on there, and I find them very, very difficult to control. I like the harder pastels like this one. So my favorite one is Rembrandt or Jackson's own brand. Rembrandt would be my #1 pick. They're very reasonable price as well. They're the harder pastel like this, and I would suggest buying a set. I'm going to get a full set, but buying them what's called a half stick, which is about this long. Full stick is about that long. So the half stick, say you're going to spend £40 on it, you get lots of colours in a half stick compared to a full size stick, and the half stick is more easy to hold. So you can see straight away how powerful these are as far as pigment and opacity. They're very, very opaque compared to the pencils, so they cover easier if you're doing backgrounds, and you can see super easy to blend compared to pencils. So keep that in mind, okay? Pastel sticks, although people that are only used to pencils are a little bit afraid of them, they are certainly advantageous, especially when doing backgrounds. And you can also do them with underlayers, but you know, just be careful with underlayers not to go and use lots of it. You can do exactly the same, put it on. That's when I would be using my paper stump gently, you see, to get rid of the grainy texture of the paper, and then perhaps just a little more, then blend that with my finger, and then that could be ready for texture and refinement on top. While I'm talking about applying pastels, I wasn't planning on it, but I might as well show you PanPastels as well, rather than just stick with pencils. If you're new to PanPastels, they come in these, what they call little cake tins, okay? It's basically like a pastel stick compressed down into them. You apply these in a different way. You apply them with what they call a soft tool, SOFFT. There's lots of different shapes and sizes and sponges, big variety, so you can put different marks on there. And all you basically do is just put them in there, gentle rub with it, pick up some of the pigment, apply it to the surface, almost always in a light circular motion. Okay, and then just pick up some more and go again. Now, I love PanPastels for underlayers on animals. It makes it easy to apply, unless you're extremely heavy-handed, and I show you how to apply these properly for animals and how to mix colours in my longer videos. Unless you're extremely heavy-handed, you won't apply too much of them, okay, because the sponge, the very nature of the sponge itself, pushes it down into the surface of the paper, and you can blend together as well, or even really mix colours together. Just bring that one up into the purple, you see, blend them together, or even mix a colour. So you could be using a little bit of that light purple, a little bit of the dark purple, and creating, you know, a different shade or different colour, even by adding different colours. Low angle, again, when you're applying it, you're not going in like this. You're going in almost flat to the paper. Don't expect these little sponges to last long. They do wear out quickly. The more pressure you put in on there, the more quickly they will wear out. I'm not a massive fan of these for backgrounds because they're definitely not completely opaque. When you compare this to a pastel stick, the pastel stick is massively more opaque. So you've got to keep that in mind. If you're using a coloured paper, then that paper will affect the PanPastels you put on top. So for instance, if you was using a black paper and you was going to put, say, yellow PanPastel on top, you would notice the yellow would look much duller, okay, just because of the black underneath. Whereas if you was using a yellow stick, that yellow stick would still be super vibrant and opaque on top of black paper. If you was using a pencil, it's somewhere in between the two depending on the brands. I think the pencils are a little bit more opaque than PanPastels. Like I said, I don't want to make this complicated. I just want to show you how to apply the actual pastels. So theory is all well and good, but what do you then do when you're actually doing the drawing? Okay, so I've got a couple of colors here. What I like to do straight away is get something fairly dark in place so that I can judge tonal values. Okay, now you'll see this on loads of my videos. Now this particular piece of paper, it's got some faults in it. Okay, don't know if you can pick it up, but if I go across it like that, you see some lines up here. That's because there's faults actually in the paper, but we'll forget about that for now. So by getting some of the darks in place, as I said, it's going to help me judge the colours by it. I'm using the pencil on its side, just as I showed you. Okay, on its side. I'm turning it every couple of strokes, keeping the tip nice and sharp. Okay, and then I will go out like that. This is not a demo that I'm doing. I've got loads and loads of lessons on my channel. Okay, let's put a little bit of brown in here just so I know where that's going to live, and then it would be a darkish blue. As I said, I'm not going crazy getting colors accurate. Dark up here. When I'm first doing this, I'm thinking in tonal range. That's not quite right, is it? Darkish brown. Pencil always on the side. Put one colour over the other. And then down on the mouth here. Only when I'm trying to actually detail an area like that do I hold it like a pencil or like a pen. Other than that, it's on its side. It's only when I want to do, you know, a line that's going to stand out. Okay, so let's think. This goes dark around the ears out here, brown like that. I'd be spending a lot more time doing this. You can watch these lessons on my art channel and free ones on YouTube as well. Okay, so when I got the basics, what do I do then? That's when I come in with my paper stump on its side. I normally start in a lighter area. See, small circular strokes. It makes it all look a bit lighter, and it'll start to make it look more like a fuzzy, out of focus photograph. Well, not even a photograph, it won't look that good. But that's the effect I'm looking for. And what this is doing is just getting rid of that kind of grainy appearance. Now, I don't want to put this, it's picked up some pastel, because if I show you here, you see, it's a bit dirty. I could use a microfiber cloth, just give it a wipe or two, turn it, get a cleaner area, and then go into the brown. And you see those lines? They'll disappear. And what it's doing is gently pushing the pastel into the paper surface. Okay, I can even make an edge softer by doing those small circular strokes there. Now, if you want an area to go darker or dirtier, obviously use the dirty to go in. So that would be the underlayer. Well, now I'm thinking more refinement. Right, now what do I need to do? Well, this area, let me get that light in a bit more. Yeah. This area here needs to be darker. I want a bit more control over my pencil. So rather than be like that, now I'm going like that. But I'm keeping that angle low. Okay. Up here towards the eye. I'm doing the shape a little bit wrong. Don't worry about that. This is just a lesson on holding the pencils. So that needs to be darker. Up in towards the eye. The eye itself, you see I can turn the pencil, get a sharp edge on it. I'll come around like that and up. Remember, I'd be spending more time getting more accuracy on this. Up here, flat to the pencil. Holding it flat and filling in an area. And around like that. Around here. So up on top, blend that a bit. Down there. Now I don't want to go with a stump over this again, or it'll just keep removing pastel. So once I've done the initial blending with it, then what I use instead is my finger gently if I want it to be blended. Down here, much darker. See how it's going much darker there. Refine that edge shape there. Okay. There. So on the mouth, got a little bit of blue out here. I'm going to put one colour on top of the other. See, gently. And then I've got some browns. There. Some more of these warmer colours. Pencil on the side again. And here. Around. A bit in there. Soften it with my finger. I can make this a bit richer. A warmer colour going on there. See, I can keep building the colour. It should be out there more, actually on top. So this is how the blending is done. Let me get a grey to go on there as well, just to have it make a bit more sense. So you grey that down. And you're going back and forth. In here. Let's see. Make it a bit darker. And then I would put lighter colours and tones on top. You see how easily this actually sits on top, and that's because I haven't put much of an underlayer down. Remember I said that I don't like to, keep building up underlayers because you won't get as much pastel easily on top. Well, this is showing how, just by not putting too much down, I can build up those layers. So here, use my pencil on the side again. texture on top of it. I don't want to blend it too much, so I use my finger. And then, whoops, drop the pencil. Let's see, let's get something a bit lighter on top. If I've got marks like that and I think, oh, they're too pronounced, just use a finger to darken them. Around here, I can think, right, this needs to be a bit darker, more shadowy looking. I can use the pencil on this side and virtually just use the weight of the pencil. You see how that's like glazing on the surface, just the weight of the pencil, making it look a little bit dirtier. But because I blended that in with the paper stump, you can barely see those fault lines in the paper. Like that. Underneath here would be darker. I can use my pencil in more of the shape or holding position of a pencil or a pen. You see, it's giving me more control. Down here we've got a little dark line as well. Like that. And in fact, right underneath goes very dark here, doesn't it? So let's just put that in so that jawline there makes sense. It's quite dark brown in there. And then a little bit like that, I'll just use the colours that I've got. In hand, and a little bit in there as well. But all I wanted to do with this was show you basically how it works in real life, because as I said, it's not very often you do circles and things like that when you're doing animals. Okay, so it's all right knowing all these techniques to hold the pencil and blend it, but when you're actually doing the subject, it works a little bit different. Let's put a little bit of brown on there. See, it's circular strokes when I want to fill in, little circles. More of a grey blue here, so I can think to myself, oh, grey blue. Right, grey. A little bit of blue, grey blue. You can think of colours as easy as that. You think, oh, too vibrant. Let's go over it with a tiny bit of black. Knock that colour down a bit. Okay, that's pretty good. You can think, blend it, soften it a bit, put those colours together, and then come back on top. Let's refine it with a bit of texture. See, this is how you think about controlling the colours. Over here, I'm thinking, okay, that's a bit too vibrant. Let's knock that down. I can see it's more of a dark browny colour. Doesn't need to get any more technical than that. Doesn't need to be difficult. I want that softer. There. This angle and there should be changed a bit. Darker grey down in here. Put that in. A bit more texture in here. That's how you build it up. Brown around the nose. Simple as this. I see texture on top, little bits of grey. Bit of grey down in here. And then perhaps a little fleshy pinky colour. So you can see the way you hold the pencil is almost always at an angle, really low. Almost always. Bottom of the eye. The eye needs to be smooth. We don't want no texture in the eye. So let's put the light colour on. Let's put some brown on. And then let's get a paper stump. Let me use a clean one so you can see how it works. Okay, small circular strokes. Push those two colours together. Small circular strokes. I know it needs to be richer out here. I know this is a bit too rich, but I'm just doing it with the pencils that I've got at hand. Then a little bit of brown in the central part of the eye. Small circular strokes. Come over here. I don't want to blend it too much now, so I'll use my finger instead. Go very lightly. Top of the eye, so bottom of the eye shape has changed a bit. Should be a bit more like that, shouldn't it? And then it comes around. Let's see. I don't want to complicate this little lesson. Like that. The eyelid will come over like that. So now I don't need the paper stump now. Any blending from now on will be just with my finger. Now I left the top of the eye part here, just paper, just so that I won't get too much of another colour contaminating into it. So if you want something light, don't put anything dark under there. And then I can come in with a lighter grey. Okay, so in a few minutes, let me see, it's just, we've got a little dog's eye coming along. So that's the biggest takeaway is use your pencil on the side almost all the time. You can do whole drawings with just a pencil. You don't need especially to be having things like PanPastels and anything else. You can do it with just pencils. Use the pencil on the side, blend it with a stump to get rid of the texture of the paper. Then go back in and re-establish the darks. This time you won't have the texture of the paper. Okay? Paper is everything. It's a critical thing. Don't scrimp and save. Don't think you're saving on paper. You're not. Things will go wrong and it won't hold layers. If you want to get something that's cheaper, get the pencils cheaper. Carbothello, Pitt, Derwent, they're all very good ones. You do not need the most expensive Caran d'Ache pencils to do good drawings. I use virtually none of them. They're not really my favourites at all. Okay, you don't need expensive pencils. You do need good quality paper. Otherwise the pastels won't hold onto the surface, and you need them to hold onto the surface. You use the pencils like a pencil or a pen, you know, more to 45-degree angle rather than holding it like that. When you want control over it, when you're doing little tiny fine details, that's when you want it to hold it like that. Okay, so with pastels, we've got the fantastic advantage of being able to put lighter colored details over the top of dark underlayers, just like this. Okay, with other mediums, you can't do it this easily. This is what drew me, no pun intended, to pastels. I found they was much easier to use than colored pencils. Other people like colored pencils more. Okay, soften that off. So that's basically it. You don't want to overcomplicate the process either. The best way to learn is to give it a go. Okay, lots of my lessons show you easy ways of doing it, just like this. Okay, but don't be scared of it. You've got to give it a go because it's all a learning process. There. Now if you enjoy the lesson, let me know and I can do more like this.